I'm going to be the PC police today. So in a moment, I'm going to have these lovely panelists introduce themselves, maybe give me just a brief introduction of who you are, include your pronouns, please. What games are your favorites? What games are you most involved in? And your favorite games of all time, maybe? And I feel like that's a good way to start. And if you forget anything, I will hold you accountable personally. Yeah, we'll start with Matt.
Story of my life. Hey, I'm Matt. I am the creative director of NYXL, which is New York's esports org. It's really difficult to say what we are. We have 3 teams: one in the Call of Duty League, one in the Overwatch League, and one in the soon-to-be Valorant League. Everybody needs to knock on wood so that we get a franchise spot. Because we just submitted our application like Friday. It was terrible, and Pride was ruined. So those are the games that I'm most involved with, although those aren't the games that I'm playing. Like, I've always been an Overwatch fan, but I'm a Genshin Impact kind of guy. So that's where most of my time is going. If Genshin Impact is not on, then it's Rocket League or Overwatch, usually. I hate Valorant with a passion.
I guess we'll have to talk about that later.
Yeah, we will, and we will fight.
And what are your pronouns?
Oh, he, him.
He, him. Great.
Yeah.
Work.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Nico. My gamer tag is Ryobi. As far as my favorite game, or maybe I'm projecting. And they're like, oh, you're a gamer. I'm like, kinda, in some ways, in all the ways that are the least relatable. So,
Well, if that's the case, you have to tell us at least who your main is.
Princess Peach.
Really?
She's a queen. What?
I'm kidding.
She's a queen. There's like 3 girls in Melee. It's like Peach, Sheik, Samus. Oh my God.
Zelda doesn't count.
Do I even
Melee.
play this game? She's. Yeah, I said Samus. True. Okay, 4. She is. She's a hero. And yeah, that's me.
Hello. My name is Maurice. I also go by Dancer. I mainly play Tekken. Oh, and my pronouns are he, him. There we go. I mainly play Tekken. I've been playing Tekken for about 11, 12 years at this point now, competitively. Before that, I was playing Melee as well. I'm a Sheik main, so also, if I'm not playing Tekken, then I'm playing Destiny 2 with all my heart and soul, because I'm in love with that game so much. I don't know why. And I think that's it. Yeah, anything else? Did I miss anything? Nope.
That's perfect. That's enough for me.
Hi, how you doing? My name is Max. You could also call me Sherry. I don't care. Pronouns, you could use he, they, or she. I don't care. I grew up playing a lot of MMORPGs, so mostly Guild Wars, MapleStory, World of Warcraft. Now, lately, I've been playing a lot of League of Legends. I've been playing League for about 8 years on and off. I have an unhealthy relationship with it. Also, currently, I've been playing a lot of Civ 6, and because I'm a loser. Uh, and I would say my favorite game series of all time, since you did mention that, is the Fire Emblem franchise. I can talk about that for hours. My gaming tag for almost any game that I'm allowed to make one for is Radiant Nayla, and that is based off of the Fire Emblem series. So, yeah, that's me.
Super fun, amazing. Thank you all. So I guess we just jump right in with, gays, LGBTQIA plus alphabet mafia in gaming. So off the top of your head, or think about it a little bit, are there any games or companies that really do a good job with the LGBTQ representation within their game, whether it's how queer people are represented within the game, whether it's how a company takes care of their minority employees, fill in the blank, anything involving that sort of thing.
So, I'll start because I have the microphone. Although I don't know how much I have to contribute to this. In the Fire Emblem series, I think starting 3 games ago, one of the last handheld versions of the game, you are able to build relationships with same-sex characters, and even more recently in Three Houses, which is the Switch game, you're able to even marry a same-sex character, which I think is really groundbreaking. I've never really seen that in most big franchise games. Outside of that, though, I don't have much info on this question. So
There was a organization that was involved in Tekken. They were named Equinox. They unfortunately have disbanded, but they did a lot of charity work. And really utilize their players who really contribute a lot to our scene, the gay scene and the Tekken community in itself. And they did a lot of work, when it comes to breast cancer, when it comes to the gay community. They did a lot, and I really commended them, and I really looked up to them for the work they've done.
And you said that they don't.
They're no more.
No more?
Unfortunately, yes, no more.
It's hard to say because Melee is a retro game, and also Nintendo is so gigantic. I think their whole model and how they like to appear is just incredibly family friendly. Doesn't want to touch anything quote unquote political, quote unquote social cause related. So I don't think there's a lot of conversation with Nintendo and LGBTQ communities like that. I think I would definitely love to see it more in newer games. Maybe I'm not aware of what they are, but I think one thing that I've loved in Nintendo space communities at the very least is because I feel like they're pretty hands off with it. A lot of the people who enjoy Nintendo games kind of put their own spin on characters, and I love that. Because it's just kind of like a blank slate. It's we don't want to say anything about it. They kind of Nintendo fans are okay, I'll make it up. I like imagining this character is gay, and I like imagining this character is non-binary, and that's really fun for me, which I think is harder for, if you're just completely brand new or young to get into it, but at the same time, I think there's some really cool community building aspects that can be done with that. It's more grassroots, I would say.
So what you're saying is that the community is more of what makes Nintendo, for lack of a better way to say it, it makes Nintendo queer because of the community response to things.
Right, exactly. I think the grassroots community of Nintendo takes bits and pieces of the characters where they see themselves and their queerness in it, and they bring it up. I wouldn't say Nintendo celebrates it, but they're not against. They're very hands off, and I think that's pretty true in a lot of the work that they do. So I'm pretty neutral about it, but I am very thankful for the grassroots enjoyers of Nintendo games that create that for others.
The big game that changed my life as a queer gamer was Stardew Valley. I just remember grinding so many hours in like this black hole of games, and meeting the skateboarder boy of my dreams and marrying him. And that was such a big deal for me because I had never seen anything like that in video games. Stardew Valley remains just one of the greatest games that I've played. I've since stopped playing it, and I don't know why, but that was a big moment for me. I think seeing Activision Blizzard write into their characters' lore, gay and lesbian relationships, I think it's meaningful, but I don't think it's enough. With especially with Overwatch, Tracer, the lesbian character, and Soldier 76, the gay character, even though there's no real lore to support that. It's nice. It's a good effort. But when I see, a single gay flag once a year as an icon, it's kind of like, are you actually pandering? Or are you actually interested in showing people who are like us in your video games? Which, funnily enough, Call of Duty, every year they have these like amazing trans and BIPOC, like all of these amazing flags that you can download and make your calling card. Which Call of Duty, like, out of all of the games from the Activision Blizzard world, why is that the one that's getting like the bi flag and the trans flag and the like lesbian flag?
Back when I used to play, I was definitely called a few slurs on Xbox Live. That's for sure.
I love it. And you know what I love the most about that? If you have that on your calling card, they see it when they die. So like, you're a badass bi person killing all these toxic little straight kids, and it just makes me so happy. But for Overwatch, there is a massive gay community. Call of Duty less so. I always say that like I'm the only gay dude in Call of Duty, which is great because like I make it look cool. But Overwatch has a massive, great queer community, especially here in New York. And one of the things that we like to do every year during Pride is just celebrate them and tell them that like New York history is gay history. And we get a lot of backlash from sort of the global Overwatch community, but at the end of the day, we're all New Yorkers, and we need to stand behind these people. Every time we have a watch party, it's such a great experience seeing such a great community getting together and celebrating every one of their members. I love it so much.
And another thing that I just thought of off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure it's Last of Us also. I don't know if any of you played Last of Us.
The Last of Us.
Has a very compelling, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but it has some very compelling queer storylines that actually got a crazy amount of backlash, which kind of now leads into another question of, excuse me, rather than focusing on the positives, what are the opposite, the flip side of that coin? What are the bigger issues that are impacting people in gaming spaces, LGBTQIA, that are not on the positive side? What are the negative sides of things?
I think when we let it slide is when it's negative. Cheer Girl does it best. I love her to death. She does not accept bullshit from people in public lobbies, and she calls them out on it. And I think one of the things that we're lucky as with masculine voices in public spaces is that we can pass as straight and therefore not receive the backlash of homophobia or transphobia or, horrible shit against women. And I think one of the things that we have to do is that if we're in public matches on Halo or Call of Duty or all of the other games that are filled with toxic masculinity, if we hear the F word, we call them out on it and we say that's not acceptable. And we use our fucking humor to make them look stupid. And I think that's our strongest power. With stuff like Activision Blizzard, just obviously, for those who don't know, Activision Blizzard is embroiled in controversy because it's a toxic work environment for literally everyone but white straight men. And just make your voice be heard. Say that it's not acceptable. Stop playing games that encourage this behavior, because your dollar is literally the only thing that matters. And that's what I believe.
No, I mean, I think that's completely correct, like particularly about the language that's being used in gaming communities, because I mean, it's no secret that gaming communities are cishet, male-dominated spaces, like through and through, and a lot of, cishet men, I think, like toxic masculinity grows within their communities, and they just kind of stick to these words that I think to them, they're not as bad as, like, if you asked anyone else in a non-cishet space, like how bad they really are. So I think in a lot of ways, like when you go into gaming communities, like you'll find casual sexism, homophobia, transphobia, all that stuff, and it's just incredibly normalized, even by the top players, because that's where they were cultivated in. And I think one of our biggest issues right now is, I think, because gaming spaces, obviously, this is more on the competitive aspect of things, but a lot of top players in competitive gaming spaces, like they just go all the way to the top, embracing this toxic masculinity, and all of a sudden they become a spokesperson for the game. And whoever lands in that spot has such a tremendous amount of influence in the community without really realizing it. I think a lot of, and like rightfully so, right? Like we play these games because they're fun, including the top players. They do it just because it's enjoyable, and they never think that they're going to become a voice that represents the entire community, but it's just kind of this natural thing that happens. And I think when you look across all the different games and seeing who are the leaders of those communities, like those communities that have good leaders are always the healthiest. So I think one person that comes to mind a ton is Sonic Fox, who's a non-binary fighting game player who is just incredible at every game they play. So everyone takes their word as gospel because, they're just amazing. So if the best player in the world, this person that you look up to for their skill and their accomplishments, is saying, hey, actually, these are all horrible things that you guys say about LGBTQ folks, and I don't accept it, and also I'll beat you up in the video game if that's your main thing that you think is important. If you disagree, like that actually goes a really long way, especially if all of the tournaments you're watching are of this person. But then there's other gaming communities where the top 10 players or whatever are all just incredibly sexist, homophobic. They don't call each other out. Their treatment of women is terrible. And so I think, to, I guess, sum it all up, like the biggest hurdle I've seen for LGBTQ folk in spaces is who the leaders are and what they show to their communities that they display as acceptable.
Now, is there anything off the top of your head that you could potentially recommend? Like, who ultimately is responsible for those top gamers? Is it the community itself who's playing? Is it their job to police these things within the community? Is it the person running the tournament? Is it the people running the multiple tournaments because there's national things going on? Is it the game developing company? Because a lot of the time they step in and they do stuff. I mean, Nintendo never does, but everybody, that's a whole different thing. But ultimately, the question is, who would you like to be more responsible? Who can take this burden on and try to fix this issue?
So I think there's a lot of people in play. I think that there are lots of different people with power in gaming communities. You have top players, you have tournament organizers, you have the gaming companies that create, the safety and like behavior protocol in the game systems themselves. I think another one that's like obviously huge to talk about is men. I think men have a lot of power, obviously in many ways, but in a big way, because I think for me in the Melee community, like there are lots of trans folks and gay folks that could educate all of these top players, but also they're still trying to survive in the community that allows them to be harassed. So I think that happens a lot in all different types of spaces where it feels like the burden is on the people who have to face the oppression and the harassment themselves, which is already insanely exhausting. So I think it goes for men and people in positions of power. Obviously, different types of men have different types of power, but people in positions of power to stand up against these top players and say, hey, that's not acceptable, because ultimately that's who they listen to. Like if you're the best player of a certain game, again, people listen to you. If you run the tournaments and say we don't accept these types of players, those players are less likely to come, so on and so forth. There's so many different angles, but I would say as like a catch-all, like people in positions of power, both within the scene, but also in the broader sense of like, male, whiteness, that type of thing.
Thank you.
I think with social media now, I think it's a lot easier for us to hold people accountable when they say something that's out of line. And I love that you mentioned Sonic Fox, because they are a huge inspiration to us, to me, to the community, and they play Tekken. So it was crazy to see someone of that caliber that comes into our community and says, hey, like you can't bully me. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, and regardless of what you think of me, I'm still gonna kick your ass. And that's it. You have to hold that. But I think as a whole, as a community, I think we all have to hold each other accountable. And I think the tech community does a really good job of that. A few years back, we had a lot of players come out as trans. So we have a very huge trans community in the Tekken scene. And as you probably could think, it got really nasty on Twitter. People just calling people out of names, calling their dead names. It got really, really nasty on Twitter. And I think the top players of Tekken did a really good job of saying, hey guys, this is not acceptable. You need to stop this. We're all part of the same community. And we all have this love for this game. We all need to come together and enjoy the game together and stop this mess, because this is not acceptable. And I think the tech community did a really good job of that. Of course, we still see it from time to time, especially with people of color, marginalized groups. But thank you. But yeah, I think as a whole, the community really needs to hold each other accountable. And I think from there we go up.
I mean, to piggyback off that, I don't know. I feel like aside from League of Legends, a lot of the games that I play don't have like top players, or even like, like Twitch and YouTube streamers that I watch. Virtually none of them are in and of themselves queer in any way, so they don't come from that perspective. So a lot of like the pro gamers that I've like grown up watching aren't from our community, but it is really empowering to see more and more, like one of the streamers that I watch who plays Civilization a lot, he will immediately ban anybody who uses hate speech in his group chats or in his streams. And I think people that have that platform in those gaming communities really make such an impact in that way by leading by example. But on the topic of community, though, I really think certain online games, if they're not directly policing and monitoring things like that, I think they they leave it open for the community to hold each other accountable. Like a lot of times, like with League, like as a queer League player, I feel like 75% of us are support mains. And if you play League, you know that supports are always the one that gets shit on regardless. And like, so people will resort to like using like queer slurs or like gay slurs like on me without even knowing that I am in fact queer. But it's great that like if it goes so far that I feel inclined to like report a player, let's say, whether I'm the target of it or not, like League of Legends and Riot Games will almost always side with the reporter and act accordingly, and it won't just like go out into the void, the report, you know what I mean? Which I think is really impactful, and it means a lot to me. I do also, even back when I was like playing like Guild Wars and MapleStory, like you'd see a lot of like fucking 14-year-olds throwing around the F word or whatever, and it's always great like finding other queer gamers. Like it'd be like you'd be like speaking in code with people, and then you like find out like another person is queer, and then like I had like a resurgence with Guild Wars and MapleStory, and by finding like guilds that were like queer friendly, like or even like queer exclusive, and I think community looking out for each other is like the best foundation for it to go up. But it is cool seeing it more now. As someone that doesn't follow any, if you guys know any, I'm gonna ask you later, queer streamers for the games that I play, because Lord knows I fucking need to find them. But it is great seeing allies that have immense platforms on like Twitch and YouTube, holding their followers accountable. That's really inspiring. But obviously all these bitches are toxic and we got to put them in their place.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Now, I want to move into, we talked about the good things, we talked about the bad things. Maybe we can start to talk a little bit more about the solutions, potential ideas of things that we could do to keep the spaces safe for everyone, not just LGBTQ, but BIPOC, any women, any disenfranchised group, really. And what's something that we can do to maybe even hold the companies accountable as well? Any and all suggestions are welcome. I just want to kind of poke and prod around and see if we have any meaningful ideas for moving forward.
I mean, I don't know if this necessarily is something that we can do at like our level necessarily, but I think, and this is kind of something all four of us have already kind of touched on a little bit, but we all kind of acknowledge that the gaming world is predominantly cis males, and one could even argue cis white males. And I think if gaming companies and developers worked harder to diversify their creative teams and the people that make games, by having more women or queer people or BIPOC, like I think that would allow for the opportunity for like really creative minds that aren't cis men to be developing games that just are intrinsically more inclusive. I don't know how we make that happen, but I think if companies start doing that, I think it would just be all the better for everybody, not just queer people. I don't know, maybe I'll write a strong letter after the panel.
You never know, it could help.
I think also continuing the conversation beyond, Pride Month or any month that we have is also really important to make sure that we're always continuously focusing on like, these matters and these topics, just so it doesn't go away after June. It doesn't go away after February. It doesn't go away after whatever month. So I think if we can really hold these companies accountable, saying, hey, you're taking advantage, not taking advantage, I shouldn't say that. I was like, but if you're participating in Pride Month, let's continue this support going forward. It shouldn't be just 30 days. It should be the entire year. It should be the entire time we support your game, because we're the ones that are supporting your game. We're the ones that are building the hype around your game. So let's continue those conversations. Let's continue that support. And I think that's all I have.
I think for me, like, how I like to see it is, I think in many ways, I feel like we've all touched on the idea that like gaming spaces can be toxic, but there are some things in place that support us, like swift bans on people who have toxic language and stuff like that, and there are groups of marginalized folks in spaces that keep others accountable and protected and stuff like that. But I think the biggest barrier is kind of like the first impressions that people get of the community. And I think that's the scariest time to come in, is just being a random LGBTQ person or a random girl that comes to an event where you hear about video games and all you hear is the toxicness and how it's a whole, male-dominated space and that you don't fit in and all the harassment that could happen. Obviously, my perspective is informed by like a grassroots event organizing level. But I think seeing LGBTQ folks, and I also want to include women because I think that's a big one, as just people who have the potential to enjoy a video game as much as any cishet white man that plays the game, I think is huge. Because at the end of the day, a lot of these games aren't intrinsically against LGBTQ people or against women or anything like that. Like, the game is fun. People love cheering for these things and coming up with identities in these games, and it's just really exciting. I think the thing that really stops them is the social fear that when you go in, you're going to get harassed, or you go in and you feel like you're not going to have anyone to relate to you because there's not a lot of people like you. So I think when you're welcoming these people into your spaces, just being extra mindful of like, okay, like we need to, at the bat, like when someone walks in, they need to know that they're going to feel safe as an LGBTQ person in some way. Like either if it's through word of mouth, like I've had some LGBTQ folks come, with their friends or something like that. It's like, no, don't worry, I've never had that thing happen. And then they come one and they feel it, so they stay. Or anything on social media. That's why I think what you said, Maurice, is important. Like not just leaving it for this month, because if you show like, LGBTQ folks and women like in your spaces all the time, having a good time and looking comfortable and just getting excited about the thing that everyone loves, I think it makes it easier to go into that space knowing, okay, this isn't going to be like every gaming stereotype I've heard of. I see the women here, I see the LGBTQ folks, and they're having fun. They're in all the visible spaces that aren't also just, about their trauma, but about their joy with the game itself. I think that's what brings people in. If they see people like them having fun and feeling comfortable, I think they'll stay.
I remember a statistic that I read a while back that said something like it was some exorbitant number, but it said that homophobia stops when a loved one comes out of a closet. And that was really interesting to me because you have people with a lot of preconceptions who presumably hate the LGBTQ people in their lives or outside of their lives, and then their cousin or their daughter or their mentor comes out of the closet and like instantly overnight their perceptions change. And I think one of the things that we can do is lead with what makes us amazing first. And when I entered sports, I had worked in entertainment my entire life, and this is my first job in sports, albeit esports, in Call of Duty, which is the most toxic fucking shit in the world. I led with what I can do to disrupt the entire Call of Duty community first, and we were successful in that. We have some of the greatest Call of Duty athletes in history that have, decades of experience who thrived on toxic masculinity as their brand, come into our brand and shift their perspective of what it is a gay person is. Because they had never been exposed to a gay person before. They see them on TV, they see them in media, and they have a lot of preconceptions about them. But when they can see what I can do to their personal brand, their respect is there overnight. And a lot of them are like 19. They grew up in the middle of fucking nowhere. Like, I'm not saying that's an excuse for homophobia. I'm saying that they're the result of where it is that they were raised. And so I think what we can do to fight homophobia, especially in gaming, is just to be ourselves and continue to be loud and continue to express what makes us so amazing, because people will love you for who you are, and they will push the homophobia aside. And that so far has worked for me. I've met a lot of very I won't say names, but I've met a lot of very homophobic athletes over my career, and in the 2-3 years that we've worked together, they have shifted how their just entire interactions with me. And I think, it's not going to change the world, but changing one person at a time, I think, is important. And that's what I think.
Yeah, it's almost it's what you're saying is kind of similar to I the first thing I thought of was, if anybody remembers like the Hillary Duff commercials in the early 2000s, the That's So Gay commercials.
Oh,
Sorry
yeah.
to bring this up, y'all. I know it's a dark time, but and I feel like things like that, and just I feel like as a society, as gaming communities, even individually or all together, you could lump us all together, sure. The spaces are slowly getting better, which is a good thing. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, but the fact that we're even having this panel, the fact that we're even talking about any of these things is a step in the right direction. So that's really exciting. I'd now also want to open it up to anybody in here if anybody has any questions about anything or something that they would like to talk about that's in the room. Questions, comments, concerns, anything anybody would like to discuss while we're all here attentive and listening.
Mugen is here. That guy
I can
is a
also
legend.
address, if you want, I
That
can
guy
also
makes
just address.
fighting games. Hold on. That guy makes fighting games from scratch, and I just want to tell him that he's a legend.
Hey guys, sorry about that. How do you feel about people that make games for, the LGBT, but then get called out for like pandering, even if they're gay? It's very kind of difficult to like kind of make a game when like the critics, like the consumers now have a voice to change things and like kind of change the narrative.
I had talked a little bit about this earlier. Whoa. It's feedback on Activision Blizzard. So I talked a little bit about this earlier because Stardew Valley to me, have you played Stardew Valley? Have you played Stardew Valley? You need to play it. It is fucking amazing. But I had spoken a little bit about Stardew Valley being a master class in inclusion. It was the story behind it was just gorgeous, and you were allowed to be whoever you wanted and love whoever you wanted in that game, and it was written into the story as just organically. It was seamless. Activision made Soldier 76 gay 3 years into his lore overnight during Pride Month because they couldn't put a pride flag in the actual game. That to me is pandering. It was low-hanging fruit. It was tacky. It was boring. And it had nothing to do with Soldier 76's story at all. So I think if you think of a human and you think what is their story first and foremost and how being queer fits into that story, rather than thinking, how can I make a queer person a part of my game, then I think you're all set. That's what I think.
I also think that a lot of the pandering issue comes from people who show up, they do one thing. They're like, oh, here's my token thing for the gays, here you go, or for women, or for whoever, and then they shut up. They don't do anything else. The pandering issue comes in when it's that single one-off, I'm including you, versus showing up for people all the time. So at least that's, I think you can make the distinction between very clearly with pandering versus actual representation if you just look at their track record. And I think just knowing that people call out companies for pandering all the time. All you have to do is look up, hey, have you done things for gay people? Have you actually donated? Have you put your money where your mouth is? That ultimately is the only way to really know if they're pandering, but I don't know if there's a solution to pandering per se.
Yeah, I think someone could accuse a game of being pandering even when it's not. I think that's something that could just happen because of whatever informed opinion, or there's so many people in the world that there's got to be someone that's going to think something's pandering when it's not. But I do think the key thing that links what you two said was kind of like a level of authenticity to it, like not just putting like a pride flag on like a jacket and being like, that's the gay character, yay. Or just being like, in passing, one character says like, yeah, I'm gay, it's hard. Anyways, let's continue with the story. And it's just like, that's what I think pandering is. But like, if it's woven into the story the whole way through, not even that you have to have like, just that be the center, just be like, oh, this is gay the game. Like it could be like an element of the game or one character, doesn't have to even be the main one. Just something that feels very authentic and naturally fits into the story. If it's not a story-based game, I think it's just kind of about, again, having something that looks authentic. So if you're going to have a queer character and you want to represent that through the way that they dress, as long as it's not, okay, just don't do pride flag as a button and say that's the gay. I think if you're just going on no story, as long as you avoid that, you could probably just be like, yeah, this is a queer character, because actually queer people dress like a lot of different things, and that's awesome. Yeah, it's like t-shirt and jeans. That's a queer character. Why? It's comfortable. It was cheap. I bought it at Uniqlo. I don't know. I think that's when it feels authentic as opposed to just like not. I think it's the words are for me are like dynamic and like authentic.
Yeah, same. I have nothing to add. You guys have said it all. I fully agree. I think just slapping a sticker on a character and say, hey, you're gay, is not the way we should be doing things. Like you guys have said before, if there's some authenticity to it, there's like lore, there's a track record, there's proof that these companies are actually supporting communities and not just trying to get coin out of us. I think that's a great way to go about it. Yeah.
Again, they've already said everything, but the only thing I could chime in on it is like, I think there's if you're allowing yourself to be critical enough of any game, right? It becomes more and more apparent when some game or some company is like, oh, look at this one thing I'm doing, versus just like having it be organic, like they were already saying. Like even with story-based games that I play, like again, just using Fire Emblem as an example, like there is a queer character in the newest one, and they never outright say that he's queer, but he can't develop like relationships with most women to the point of marriage, but like can with a lot of men and like beep boop bop. But they never once like address it in a way where it's like, oh, but like look at this thing we're doing for you guys. Like it's just part of the story. But as someone that's also really, really critical of like corporate pride, I would almost rather non-story based games not even slap a pride flag on anywhere on their game. Like, don't even put it anywhere close, because then it just feels to me like, yeah, and you know what I mean? I would almost rather the neutrality than like the bullshit performative allyship. You know what I mean? I don't really think there's any point there. It's a little bit nihilistic, but I'd rather the neutrality than like the bullshit.
Amazing. Any other thoughts, questions? Sorry, my knees don't work that well.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Parker. One thing I always have found kind of fascinating, especially in the Twitch streaming community, is how the queer community gravitated towards specific games, even more specifically Dead by Daylight. I've never played it myself, but I always just found it so interesting that specific, super gory, but like also like really fun and communicative game was taken into the queer community. So I was wondering if you can talk about how or why you think some games the queer community gravitates to, and kind of like the psychology of that.
I mean, I think for me personally with that experience, there's kind of just like I'm using the phrase safety in numbers as like a turn of phrase, but it's not exactly what I mean. But for me, although I know that there is a really big queer gaming community for that game, I have that experience with Among Us. During the pandemic, I became part of a really big Twitch group of like predominantly drag queens and drag kings that all were playing Among Us. And we would get on like every fucking night and like, we'd smoke, drink, and like play Among Us. But, that's a team of 10 or up to 10, right? When you play that game, and like when there's like one or two gay people, like maybe by happenstance, and then everyone else is just like whatever, it's like okay. But for us, we would just go on, even if there was only like 8 or 9 of us any given night and not a full room of 10, we would let like 1 or 2 randos in. And then there'd be something kind of magical about kind of like flipping the whole, like, this is gonna sound really bad. There'd be something really fun about like fucking with the straights, and everything in the chat would just be like, oh my god, yes, Diva, just like hyper femme, and we would just have so much fucking fun with it, to the point where sometimes they would just leave the room, like they would leave the game because they're like, what? You know what I mean? Like, ugh. you know, or like if there was only even like 4 or 5 of us, which is like a good half, we would all be on the Twitch chat without the other 5, and we'd be like, all right, like, let's kill off the other ones first. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. There's something really magical, I think, when you could find those little pockets of like family almost, you know, within the gaming community. It just makes it even if it's within your own bubble, right? It almost makes it feel more inclusive when you just don't have to give as much of a fuck about the opinions of others. That's always my favorite thing about it.
I always thought that, you know, queer people actively searched for niches. Like if you look at the Dead by Daylight crowd or the game itself, the audience that's going to gravitate to it is already a niche. So at least from what I've seen myself, queer people look for niches almost as a safety net because they know that they'll find a smaller, more controlled group. I don't know if anybody else can speak to that, but the smaller the community is, generally the safer it can tend to be. At least that's just in my experience, but just wanted to hop in.
Yeah, it's like that for the Tekken community as well. You know, I'll go into like a Twitch chat and I'll see one or two people that I recognize that are queer, and I'm just like, hey, how y'all doing? And it's kind of like, you know, like he was saying, we just kind of like, all of a sudden there's like, we multiply in the chat, and now we're bullying the hetero people. But it's like a family. You know, we find each other, we get to know each other, and then we kind of form like our own family. And then next thing you know, there's like 20 of us in the chat, and we're all speaking in our own vernacular, in our own language, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
I think the trend is just like whatever allows us to bully straight people, which is, you know, kind of fun. I think that's one. But okay, my real answer is like, I think there's like 2 camps where it's like, one, like what you said, like it's a niche, because I think like, I think sometimes in I don't know, being LGBTQ is like you have a hard time expressing your own identity sometimes, and I think a niche allows you to just kind of live a brand new identity and just kind of be fully in it, where like by being in that niche, you're already accepted because it is niche and because there's so few people that enjoy it like that. Like you kind of just get to have that validation. So I think that's one thing that attracts a lot of people. And the other one is almost like in the way of Among Us, where it's like so like the concept of the game is so broad that you can put your own LGBTQ spin and heart and love into it, and it takes over the whole game. I think both of those are really are the 2 biggest ways that I see like certain games gravitating towards LGBTQ people. So like anywhere from like the really small game about, I don't know, a gay character to like Minesweeper. Like I could imagine there's a big LGBTQ thing in Minesweeper for whatever reason, because it's just like, well, there's no boundaries that says I can't be LGBTQ here, so how do I make that happen? And then
Cut his mic.
There's someone.
No more. Cut his mic. Not
Like
Minesweeper.
Minesweeper, come on, it's
Not
so fun.
Minesweeper. This is Minesweeper erasure. We don't believe in her.
What? What? That's what I'm saying.
I can't believe we mentioned Minesweeper once during this. That was amazing. Wow.
He's getting paid extra. That was a sponsorship.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone even knows how to play that game, Minesweeper. Like, we just click and then... Oh, okay. Wow. I was about to say, so, like, my whole bit was not about Minesweeper, so I don't know where to begin. I'm a little bit older, so I do think that part of what drew me to the games that I loved so much growing up was that growing up gay sucks, and you have to deal with shithead kids who are constantly giving you shit, and games were a form of escape. And I found that as I grew up and as I started meeting more queer people, like, the games that were fantastical escapes were the ones that drew us in the most. I think of Bayonetta. I don't know why that one sort of appears on the top of my head. It starred this powerful, fabulous fucking woman who's like destroying giant monsters, and like every gay loved that game, and I was trying to figure out why, and it was because it was this fantastical other world where women were powerful and feminine was the power, and that was something that we didn't have access to growing up as kids, being bullied for being feminine or for being different or for being other. So I think that like those are when I think of Overwatch as well, like it sort of follows those same constructs of being fantastical and feminine power and a different world than the one that we're in. And I think that those just queer people are just naturally drawn to want to leave the world and go into this other fantastical world that's just better, and also addicted to creating it, which is great. I think that's where we drive our power from.
Great. I think we have time to do one more, if anybody has anything else to add or ask. If not, that's fine too.
Mugen. Love that guy.
What did you guys think of Gay Tony for Grand Theft Auto? You know, they came out with a game. It was called The Ballad of Gay Tony. That was a pretty big deal. Well, it was a big deal for me because, you know, being in the Bronx and like, you kind of have to put this like weird straight armor on a little bit. And when I had a game, that was like a perfect excuse to be like, nah, man, we could just play this game because, you know, like it's like the new, like, you know, Grand Theft Auto. Mind you, I'm like fucking all the guys. I'm like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Just like whoring it out and like killing people, and it was cool. And it was like, I think that was like a really good, like when you were saying like being neutral, like not making it so obvious. I mean, the title said Gay Tony, and I think a lot of people didn't play for that, but it was actually a really good game. I mean, it's Grand Theft Auto, so it's constantly doing it over and over, but did you guys like ever play that? That was like a really good game. That didn't force the gay, like, it didn't force being gay, he just happened to be gay and happened to be like this big mobster. Kind of like Omar from The Wire, he was basically that, but white.
I'm obsessed with the fact that Mugen is here. You guys, this guy makes, I already said this, he makes Street Fighter games from scratch, and they are fucking legendary. Thank you so much for coming. I'm obsessed with you. I've never played a second of Grand Theft Auto in my life, so I'm going to pass.
I also have not played Grand Theft Auto. Maybe like when I was a kid, I would just like, I don't remember. I did not play that much Grand Theft Auto. I feel like I would just like steal two things, die, and then like turn it off. I was not good at it. No, in the game I was stealing, not stealing anywhere else. Don't put them all the time. You know what I'm saying? I did not play Grand Theft Auto.
I played a little Grand Theft Auto when I was young. It was Grand Theft Auto 3. I really played a lot. I wasn't very good at it. I died a lot. But it was crazy to when it was DLC, right? Or is it a separate title, right? Yeah. It was crazy to see a AAA title with the name gay in it. And that baffled me. I was like, oh, you guys are brave. Like this is crazy. Like you guys really releasing it like Rockstar. This is crazy. But I've heard great things about the game. So it was at first for me because I had no idea about the game. I was like, ooh, is this, you know, I don't know if I want to play this. Like you guys just straight up, are you pandering or is this legitimate? So I had no idea, but I heard great things about the game itself, but I never played it myself.
Yeah. What's funny about this game?
I mean
is
that's gay rights. See what I mean?
my
So no. Before, I mean, so I had no idea that existed. My only experience with Grand Theft Auto, like with most very sandboxy games, which I don't normally play, but I love watching them be played. So I grew up watching my friends play Grand Theft Auto. Never knew there was one called The Ballad of Gay Tony. That's such a fucking ridiculous name for a Grand Theft Auto game. But then I think it does go back to the question, right? Again, this is me coming from a place where I have no idea what the gameplay of it is actually like, so keep that in mind. But like, is that title, for example, pandering-y? Going back to that moment, right? Like, could he still be gay, and could his sexuality still be relevant to the storyline if it was just called The Ballad of Tony, whatever his last name is, or just The Ballad of Tony? I wonder if the Ballad of Gay Tony, which I think would also be a great drag king name, by the way, Gay Tony. Does it? You know what I mean? Like again, maybe I'll have to pick your brain after this for like what the actual gameplay is like and what amount of focus. Like, can you have like gay sex in it? Yeah. Bitches be woo-hooing up in here. Right.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Well, and
My dad actually played this game all the way through. He's played every single Grand Theft Auto title. My dad's a 70-year-old gamer. It's weird, but this game actually was one of the first times that I realized that my dad is kind of like he's would be super accepting. Because nothing really came up until, he was talking about playing Grand Theft Auto, Ballad of Gay Tony, and I don't remember any of the shit he said about it, but he would just be like, yeah, all this shit's happening, and it's really cool, and it's fun that they're doing these things. I'm like, oh, okay. I'll remember that for later.
you're right. I mean, I guess one final thing I'll say on that is like, I think something we haven't really addressed yet is like the levels in the I don't know how to phrase this properly. The levels of like intellect we expect out of gamers and of certain games. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like Grand Theft Auto infamously is a very like hyper masculine kind of game, right? So we imagine perhaps that most of the people that play that game probably have that hyper-masculine mentality. How much more rudimentary do we have to be in our vernacular around the queer identity and the queer experience for those people versus something maybe like Stardew Valley or something that kind of has it more intrinsically ingrained in its franchise, right? So maybe, as pandering to me as it sounds, right, Gay Tony, maybe for Grand Theft Auto players, that is something that is impactful in a positive way because there is virtually no queer dialogue around that system, and I'm sure there's actually probably a lot of anti-queer dialogue in those games. So now that I think on it, maybe it's not that bad of a name.
Who knows?
But that is something to think about, is the levels in which we can be more advanced with our conversation around the queer experience in certain game circles, I guess.
Well, without further, I think we're going to wrap this up. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. It's been a blast. I could talk all day. You can tell all of us are queer because none of us can sit in a chair. It's nothing. Don't worry about it. Anyway, again, thank you, everybody, for coming out. Proceeds from tonight are going to the center, I believe. How much have we made so far? I think you put that on here. 600. And if you donate today, I think it's $10. You can have the rest of the night free to game, I believe. Is that correct, Alec? So just $10, play some games. It goes to a great cause. And again, thank you everybody for coming out.